Hi, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, we're doing some maintenance on my 2003 BMW Z4 E85 2.5 liter automatic transmission car, which is basically my wife's car. And I've had it about 5 months. It's been fairly maintenance intensive, but nothing too major, and mostly just kind of standard BMW stuff, standard old car things, hoses, gaskets, suspension bushings, etc. So in this video I will explain some of the projects that I've done to the car while I've owned it and give you some ideas if this is a kind of car that you would like to DIY, or maybe it's a little bit too maintenance heavy, but you know, BMWs do require regular maintenance, and these cars are fairly solid if you just kind of keep up with it and can DIY yourself. So my name is Dan, you're watching DIY for Life, stay tuned. So the main reason the car is up on jack stands and incapacitated is because I was getting 2 sets of warning lights on the dash. The first was the coolant sensor light, and then the other light was the ABS sensor lights. So first I dug into the coolant sensor, and what I did is to look at the coolant expansion tank, which is this guy here, and I decided to order a new one along with the hose. That's pretty easy to replace. Unfortunately, I was sent the wrong hose, so when I tried to put in my old hose, it started leaking. So I think in my case, the tank may not have been the bad part. It was this main hose, this upper hose that goes from the radiator to the expansion tank and then into the thermostat housing here. So while I waited for that part to arrive, I decided to tackle a few other projects. The one that I just got done with is the CCV, which is the crankcase ventilation system. It's a big oily octopus that lives underneath there. Mine was leaking, therefore the oily octopus. There's a bunch of hoses. There's a really good DIY video, the 50s kid, and he kind of walked through all the steps, the way to do it without having to remove the intake manifold. So I think I got that all squared away. It's just a lot of removal and then attaching the hoses, which are a little bit fiddly, but I got that done. And then I decided to do the valve cover gasket. I'm in the middle of that project at the moment. As you can see, it's leaking up there and around here. So that's kind of a standard maintenance item on these cars. And the Z4 has a lot of room, so I can get in there fairly easily. So I'm going to knock that project out today. And I might also check the spark plugs while I'm in there, but everything seems in fairly good condition for the spark plugs and coils. I think the car's running pretty well. So I mentioned the ABS sensors, the light coming on. And so what I did is to pull out all of the sensors on each wheel and give them a clean and put them back in. I won't know if that's successful until I get that hose and can start the engine back up. But I did, you know, put the car on 4 jack stands in order to get those sensors out of the way. And then while I had the wheels off, I decided to bleed the brakes and then just check all the braking components. Pretty easy to bleed. There's just one bleeder valve on each brake caliper. Using a pressure bleeder, it just took about 1 liter of fluid to flush out the brakes. And then it also gave me a chance to kind of inspect the pads and the discs, which to be honest, I think probably towards the end of their life, but I think they're still good for another couple years depending on how much use the car gets. So that pretty much sums up the projects that I'm doing right now, but previously I have done quite a bit of work to the car. When I first got it, there was a big vacuum leak from one of the hoses back there, which was split, so it took care of that. And of course, engine air filter, cabin air filter, giving it a good detailing inside and out. And you know, most components were working. You know, nice to have good AC and heat, and you know, all the basic electronics were in good shape. I did notice while I was driving it some play in the suspension, so I replaced the control arm bushings. I have a DIY video on how I did that, so that might be helpful to you guys who probably are going to need to replace the control arm bushings at some point. They're a wear item on BMWs. They like to keep a nice tight suspension. And then the car was pretty good for a while, though I was still getting that intermittent coolant light. But I was hoping that that was just a sensor, so I replaced the sensor, but the light stayed on, and that's why I'm still waiting for that hose, and hopefully that will take care of that coolant light, and the car will run a little less hot, because I did check it and it seemed to be hot, even though the gauge stays right in the middle. What else have I done to the car? Oh yeah, one day, luckily it was parked here at the house, and the car refused to start, and I replaced the battery, and still no sound from the starter, so I banged on the starter and got a little bit of life back into that. So I ended up replacing the starter, which again is a little bit fiddly, but it is possible to access the starter, which again lives kind of underneath the intake manifold at the back of the engine. But yeah, that's possible to do without actually removing anything, if you can just get your hands back there and unbolt it and put in a new one, and then yeah, it started right up. So that kind of brings back to present day. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I've had to do to the car during my 5 months of ownership. I think that's about it. So kind of fairly standard stuff, as long as you're willing to DIY and have basic hand tools. All of it is pretty DIY friendly. I mean, you will need jacks and jack stands and some kind of basic knowledge of cars, but everything kind of comes apart pretty easily. You know, the cars are really well engineered. They're from a time when the engines prior to being turbocharged, so a little less complicated and a few less components to deal with, being a naturally aspirated straight six. So I will get back to replacing the valve cover gasket and waiting on that hose to arrive. But overall, I have to say that the Z4 is you know, a nice platform, fairly reliable for a BMW, and pretty DIY friendly, you know, especially since there's a lot of room in the engine bay. It's got such kind of a long hood that there's a fair amount of space to work on things. Oh, the other big job I did, which was the oil filter housing gasket, and that was a fairly big job. That did require all this to come out, and the alternator to come out, and the hoses to come off. So a good time to replace the hoses while you get to that gasket, which is, you know, probably a $4 or $5 part, but will leak a lot. So yeah, those are things to keep in mind if you're interested in buying a used BMW Z4 E85. But yeah, nice cars to work on, fairly cheap these days, especially here in Japan, where nobody really wants a 20-something-year-old German car, because they do require so much maintenance, and that would require it going to the dealer or an independent garage, which gets expensive fast. But if you're like me and you like to DIY, then yeah, they're fairly fun cars to work on, and usually they're pretty reliable, but it is important to stay on top of the regular maintenance, an eye on the car and fluids and brakes and all that stuff, just so you know that it's going to be safe, reliable, and fun to drive. Just a short clip from the future to let you know that all the repairs I did, in fact, seem to be working. No lights are on the dash. I took the car for a test drive, and the lights that were previously on the dashboard are no longer on, so the coolant light and the ABS lights are off. So I seem to have fixed the issue with the coolant and the ABS sensors by just cleaning those sensors, and there don't seem to be any leaks from various systems that I touched In the car, the valve cover looks clean. The CCV hoses are good. No leaks from the expansion tank. All the intake hoses are good, and I did bleed the brakes, so I double checked that the level was good and no leaks from the bleeder valves. So, from the future message to my previous self, the car is fixed. Well, please check out some of my other videos where I did more in-depth projects on this car. I'm not doing a DIY video in this case because there's plenty of information already online on how to tackle most of the projects that I've already had to do. So if you like this video, please give me a like and a thumbs up, and check out my other videos and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.